Welcome everybody back into Nerd Sesh. As always, I'm Carson Bradburn. Alongside me is Logan Camden, and the NFL regular season is officially over. So tonight we're going to be putting a bow on it. There wasn't a lot of meaningful football played today, but of course it was all building up to the grand finale, the game, not just for the NFC North, but also for the NFC's one seed, the Lions against the Vikings. And this game was competitive for a while, Logan, until it wasn't, until the Lions pulled away. And this ends up being a blowout in terms of the final score. What was your big takeaway from this?
I mean, the stars of the show for this game were Jahmyr Gibbs and the Detroit defense. The pressure they got home on Sam Darnold, how well they covered on the back end, all of their receivers, really how they sped up Sam Darnold and made him uncomfortable throughout this game. I was super impressed with Aaron Glenn's game plan and his play calls, but also the play from Alex Anzalone, from Zadarius Smith, from Brian Branch, Kirby Joseph, Amik Robertson, all these guys had great games. And that was the big question, right? Detroit's defense has been really banged up. And I mean, this was to me a really big prove it game. I'm blown away by this team and their performance today against Minnesota. The biggest play that sticks out to me is where they forced that turnovers on downs inside the red zone. Cam Akers breaks off that 58-yard run. It looks like the Vikings are finally going to break through and get in the end zone, and they can't. And I mean, for the most part, like, don't get me wrong, the Vikings had some plays. They have a couple of drives that are extended by Detroit penalties. Like, the Vikings had a really hard time moving the ball throughout this game. So I was impressed with their defense, Carson. I was super impressed with Jahmyr Gibbs. I mean, he breaks out a ton of runs in this game that break it open. And also Dan Campbell's aggression. I thought that was also a big theme of this game, along with the superstar coaching battle. You know, it was Ben Johnson versus Brian Flores. It was Aaron Glenn versus Kevin O'Connell, and it was Dan Campbell leading the ship. I really liked what he did. His aggression paying off, going for it on fourth down, and then you get the Gibbs TD from Goff inside their 10. They get a Harrison Smith encroachment, which leads to the Gibbs touchdown, which only works if you're aggressive early in this game and early in the regular season. This is the Lions. This is what they do. So you're scared that they're actually going to go for it. I was just blown away by the Lions, Carson. I feel like I've counted them out prematurely. And to me, the first round bye and home field advantage is massive for Detroit. I do not want to go to Detroit, man. How loud it was in there tonight. The fans were rowdy. I think it's a real advantage being able to be at home, to rest that next week, to maybe get some more guys healthy, and potentially, obviously, the big one is if Aiden Hutchinson can come back
Right.
for a playoff game, for potentially the Super Bowl. If he can return at all, that's massive. But the way the defense stepped up tonight, all these guys, next man up mentality. The team don't quit, Carson. The Lions have maybe the most heart of any team I've had the pleasure of watching, man. This team don't quit. They don't stop. They got a ton of fight in them, man. I don't know how much to make of this performance individually, because over the last 4 weeks, Detroit has allowed the second most points per game. They allowed 48 versus Buffalo, 31 versus Green Bay. So, I don't know if I'm fully, just like ready to go with this defense, but this was a really encouraging win and a super impressive victory.
It was a huge win for Detroit, and you talk about them having a special level of heart, man. Their culture is just different. They're one of the best coach teams in terms of having that culture guy, that leader, that figure who establishes your philosophy in Dan Campbell, but then also the minds who are running the respective sides of the football. Ben Johnson, probably the best offensive coordinator in football, and Aaron Glenn is on the short list for the best defensive coordinator in football. So it's a really special group that they have running their organization right now. This was a sensational performance from the defense, and I thought Aaron Glenn called a hell of a game and identified the biggest question mark about Sam Darnold, which has been the same thing throughout this year, which is, how does he handle pressure? Can he continue to make good decisions? Is he going to hold on to the ball for too long? Is he going to take some bad sacks? And unfortunately, the Vikings got some very ugly answers to those questions in this game. So I want to give credit to the Lions. I saw Ben Solak tweeted out in the first half, they blitzed Darnold on 55% of dropbacks, and they got pressure on 59% of dropbacks. Like, that's just unbelievable. The heat that they were bringing in the pass rush, the pressure that they were bringing down after down. But I also think that you made a good point. Like, this is a defense that has been struggling a lot as of late because they're down so many key guys. And they get back Alex Anzalone, and he's phenomenal in this game. He's such a great all-around player. I thought that he was really good in coverage. And I thought that they were good in coverage in totality. I thought that they were physical, but am I convinced that the Lions defense is just back to this extent? Or am I more concerned about what this said about Darnold? The answer for me is the latter, because I've been optimistic about the Vikings, man. I've been optimistic about Darnold as of late. I mean, the 7 weeks before this game, he had been lights out. He had been so impressive. And my thought was, if Darnold is playing at that level, this is such a complete football team. Why can't they go out there and win the NFC? And I thought that there was a real chance that I would pick them to win the NFC, but I needed to see how this game went, and this game went horribly for Sam Darnold. It really did. So again, the biggest red flag for him, the biggest question mark, he got an F on the report card in terms of how he handled that. And he was terrible also situationally. He was awful on third down. He was awful in the red zone, and consistently in all those spots, he's seeing pressure. And what's he doing? He's holding on to the ball for too long. He's missing open receivers in a lot of these spots. Like, again, the Lions covered well, and the fact that they were able to be that aggressive and not let up explosive plays through the air and not just get burnt more often, that was impressive. But at the same time, I mean, not to be cliche, but it looked like he was seeing ghosts out there, man. It really did. He looked rattled. He looked completely out of his element. And that to me just takes my confidence in this team down a peg. I feel like this was as revealing a performance as you could have in week 18 for a team that has been so good end to end this year. And Darnold, right, has had his imperfections. He had his little slump mid-season, but since then has been so good. And this was just a really, really deeply troubling performance for him, and therefore for Minnesota, because obviously he's been the swing factor for this team the entire year.
Yeah, it was a discouraging. Yo, sorry, man. Gigi's going crazy right now. I need you to pipe down, buddy. Um, I think it said a lot about Minnesota's line too. I don't like how they looked in the trenches tonight on either side of the ball, and that was troubling. Like, the Lions are really good there. They're not only strong at the top, they're also deep. They've got a lot of guys that they can turn to. They're built to withstand some injuries like this, but I also feel like Darnold was really close on a lot of plays in this game with Hawkinson just off his hands, like, and they failed. Like, he didn't play up to standard today. I don't know, man. Are you really like? Are you
I
ready
think
to
Juju's
completely
about to
sell?
attack
Dude,
you, by the way.
I don't know what her deal is, bro. She's been so buck all winter break, man.
Named after the great OJ Simpson, Juice.
Yeah, something like that. Named after Juju
That's what you
Smith-Schuster.
told me.
I know she's your favorite, bro. Juice is your favorite.
Yeah, great actor.
Yeah, I don't know, man. Or I'm disappointed. Like, you need to put the ball in the end zone when they go for it. I think Kevin O'Connell also has to be aggressive in that situation where you're down 8, 17-9. To me, that felt like a real swing play in this game where. And I'm not always, I'm a take the points guy. When I see an opportunity to put points on the board, I'm normally all for it. But in a situation like this, I think that you're down 8 points in a big game. Time is dwindling. Like, don't play with the Lions. You need to get back into this game as soon as possible. To me, it was a scared money move, and that was the end of the game. After that, Detroit took all the momentum. Gibby broke out some big runs, and this game was wraps. But I'm a little bit concerned about them in the trenches against this team, as well as Darnold. But this was a bad game from Darnold. This is the worst one we've seen from him since the middle of this season, where he was throwing interceptions.
Might have been the worst, dude. Might have been the worst. He didn't have that one catastrophic mistake, but every single down, you felt completely uncomfortable with the ball in his hands. You felt like a terrible thing was liable to happen every single play. He just didn't have like that one backbreaking turnover, but there's multiple sacks. There's the grounding. He's missing receivers with inaccurate throws. He's missing receivers because he just doesn't see them or won't throw them the ball. This was the most concerning Darnold performance, honestly, even more than the Jets game or the Jags game, the Colts game. This was really bad.
Maybe more than anything else, it's because the stakes of the game, right? I don't know if I've ever watched a regular season game with this much on the line, the difference between the 1 seed and the 5 seed, right? The repercussions of this game now are that Minnesota is going to have to likely go on the road, barring an upset from one of the lower seeds. They would have to, on the road to a Super Bowl, have to go on the road for every single game. And that's just a lot harder. I mean, you saw the home field advantage that Detroit had tonight. The Lions look better, and I feel a little foolish for putting Minnesota above. They're resilient, man. I've been ready to count out Detroit a lot of the steps of the way, dude, and I just feel wrong about them.
Yeah,
They've got a lot of fight in them, dude. And like we've been saying about the defense, with they haven't been the most consistent, right? This is their best performance in a couple of weeks. They've been bad. The offense is going to continue to be, put up points. They can outshoot
absolutely.
anybody. The defense just has to be good enough. If I had to pick a team that reminds me of them that won a Super Bowl, it would be honestly like the Drew Brees Saints, in the early 2010s, right? Best offense in the league, and their defense just got by. They did enough, and so I'm not ready to rule it out, man. I think I got to rock with Detroit over them in like power rankings and stuff moving forward after this. And Minnesota's road just got a lot tougher, dude.
It
Tough
did.
game. I mean, like I said, man, I don't know if I've ever seen a regular season game that was this important, that swung the playoff landscape this much.
It's really hard, again, to gauge just how much we should be moved by this defensive performance from Detroit because, yes, they are better with Anzalone out there. I think if they had Aiden Hutchinson and the reporting is maybe he could come back by the NFC title game, I
Can
would
I
say that they're the best team in the NFC again because I think their offense is that unstoppable. And I think Aaron Glenn is a monster. At the same time, it's like we just saw them try to bring pressure and try to live in man coverage against the Bills. And what happened against
They
an
kind of
elite
remind me of
quarterback?
Buffalo, if I'm being honest.
All right, chill. I don't know what you mean by that. Well, actually, I'll take that as a compliment because I love the Lions. But explain that. The
Really good
defense is
offenses
inconsistent.
with suspect defenses, yeah.
I don't disagree necessarily. And defenses that have had high highs but have had low lows. The thing is, Detroit has just been down so much personnel. And that's the thing with the Bills, right? At least they have their dudes available and out there on the field. And the Lions still, unfortunately, can't say that with the exception of Anzalone, who they have back out there. So I don't know, man. It's a hell of a race in the NFC, but I do think that the Lions formula just feels easier than the Vikings right now. And these teams would see each other again in 2 weeks if the Vikings win, which I do think they will do. And we would have to see a complete 180 from Sam Darnold. KOC would have to perform some sort of lobotomy on him, probably get all of the ghosts out of his mind. And he would have to lock in and he would have to be a completely different football player. And also, I totally agree on the decision to kick down 8 being totally cowardly. It felt to me like the only reason KOC did that is because they had already gone for it twice inside the 5 and they had left with no points. And it's literally the ultimate scared money don't make money move, dude. It's like just because you have been unsuccessful doing this earlier in the game does not mean the process was bad. The process was good when
When
you're in
you're
the deep red
settling,
zone
it's
like
not like
that.
it's guaranteed points either. You're settling for a
That was the
tough
cherry
field
on
goal.
top. That was the cherry on top. I'd be pissed no matter what, because what are you really gaining yourself? Okay, you go from down 8 to down 5. You still need a touchdown. Now it's just a touchdown gives you the lead, but you can obviously get a touchdown on that drive if you go for it and you're successful. So the reward really isn't that great. And I was not confident at all in Will Reichard going into that kick. He's 10 for his last 15 field goals, man. He's been really struggling for 2 months. If you have prime Justin Tucker, like, I still don't like the decision, but okay, I can stomach it. I thought going into the kick, there was a real chance that he was going to miss, which just makes it all that much worse when you consider even if he had made it, it wouldn't have done that much for you. But at the end of the day, the wheels come off after that, but it was a really bad Darnold performance long before that. I mean, he totally missed Justin Jefferson on a touchdown where he's just wide open on 3rd and goal. He took that terrible 17-yard sack on one of their first drives, and then he had Hawkinson somehow on 3rd and 18 really open, and he missed him. It was really, really ugly. And then on the flip side, it's like Goff had some terrible moments in this game. And also, props to the Vikings defense in the first half for the pressure that they got after him. We know that's what they do. He was pressured on like 40% of dropbacks in that first half, but he's able to make a throw to a receiver when he's facing a free rusher on 4th down, right? There were a couple instances where he's got a free rusher bearing down on him and he's able to maintain his composure. He did have just a really weird interception on that deep ball to Jamison Williams. He had the pick on the screen. He almost had 2 screen passes picked off. This was not a good game from either
Mm-hmm.
quarterback. In fact, for a while, it felt like we were watching an older, much worse version of both of them because they were doing the whole narrative throughout the broadcast of like, what great comeback stories from both of these guys turned it around in new situations. And then I was kind of like, damn, we're getting Jets Sam Darnold and we're getting rookie Rams Jared Goff. But I felt that Goff still played a significantly better game than Darnold.
Well, I mean, I thought it negated each other, honestly, because the Goff interception to midfield ended up being in a field goal for Minnesota. And then literally at the end of the first half, it ended up being a Vikings kick the ball out of bounds on the kickoff. Goff turns it in. So they kind of exchanged, like, it was mistake for mistake right there. But I agree. It wasn't a great game from either of them.
Darnold went 18 of 41, man, for 166 yards.
Wow. That's his final stat line.
That's his final stat line. Really, really rough.
That's the last thing that I was going to add on about Darnold is you talk about him seeing ghosts. Darnold got hit a lot tonight. You know, it wasn't just the pressure of the game and like the stakes of it. The Lions hit him early and often, and you're right. Like, I do agree. He seemed rattled by all the pressure that he was gotten because that's what I don't want to forget is like we've seen Darnold comfortable under pressure, moving in the pocket, making big plays. He was rattled tonight. He was sped up, and also I want to give the Lions more credit on that too. Coverage on the back end, but also even when Darnold would get the ball out quickly on those quick reads to the flat or underneath, the Lions
rallying to the ball.
They were crashing down. It was truly an elite defensive performance from Detroit. So I don't want to undo an entire great season for Sam Darnold, but you're right. I mean, it comes at the worst time of the year, man. Right before the playoffs, the biggest game of the year, and this is probably his worst performance of the year.
The reason it's so concerning is I was looking at their formula and I was thinking they've got a defense that is as elite as anybody in football, as elite as anybody in the NFC. And in a conference with flawed quarterbacks, they have a quarterback who is playing really good football right now. Isn't the best quarterback in the conference, but is not somebody who I had major question marks about with the level that he was playing at through last week. And now it feels like you have all of the worst questions about Sam Darnold, the rushing back, and justifiably so. And it's just like, do I believe that we are going to get 4 straight good games of Sam Darnold against really good defenses that he's going to be facing when everybody has seen definitively the blueprint is bring pressure, blitz the hell out of him. And you think, I mean, the receivers are going to win convincingly, but if Darnold can't even keep his composure to get them the ball, doesn't matter. And you're right, he's had good moments and performances under pressure, but that's been the biggest thing, right? I mean, he's taken 50 sacks this year, and he has held on to the ball in a lot of these games, and this was probably the worst instance of all of that. I do want to give credit to the Lions offense, because even though this was one of their less impressive performances, they still end up with almost 400 yards and 31 points on the board. And even though Goff made a couple mistakes, eventually, like, they're just going to grind you down. And the run game is so ridiculously efficient. And Jahmyr Gibbs is just so clearly a flat out superstar. I mean, I would say undeniably a top 3 running back in football. He's a lot closer to Saquon and Derrick Henry than anybody
100%.
else is to him. And I understand that there is an incredible offensive line blocking for him, but man, he is so ridiculously elusive. He is so absurdly fast. His contact balance, like, the dude is just a complete monster. And he shredded Minnesota late in this game, just wore him down.
Just to the boundary, like, he's explosive, and he can get up to top
So
speed
explosive.
so quickly. He can just blow by guys. I mean, he reminds me of they call him Sonic. I mean, it's, a good nickname for him. The guy's got wheels. Like, he reminds me of Flash or like
Sonic the Hedgehog. He reminds you of various superheroes and video game characters.
The one that he reminds me of most is this X-Men mutant Blink. She throws up a portal and she runs through the portal and then she jumps somewhere else. Like, he just boop boop, blink and you miss him. He's ridiculous. It reminds me a little bit. And I don't want to do this because, I mean, he's 2,000 yards, one of the greatest rushers ever. It reminds me a little bit of Chris Johnson. I mean, the way he was able to just explode and break big plays. Obviously, I mean, he's all-timer that year. But Jahmyr's an awesome running back, man. And this has been without David Montgomery, too. That's the luxury, dude. Montgomery goes down, and he's valuable, and he takes them up a notch and gives them another element that Jahmyr doesn't have with that power running between the tackles. But Jahmyr's one of the best running backs in the league, man. I completely agree. I think he's up there.
Monster, dude. Shall we go, Logan, from some of the league's best to a cold, hard reality check on your Pittsburgh Steelers? Do you even want to do it?
Yeah, I do, actually. The Steelers stink. The Steelers have a really nasty stench on them right now that they just cannot shake. Like, it is a dark cloud over their head.
Room
this
clearing,
is a hopeless, uninspired football team. The vibes are absolutely vile, horrible. I mean, I'm just tired of being right about this team, man. I've been saying all year, and I feel like I've called it every step of the way. Preseason, I said we'd go 10-7, finish second in the AFC North, and probably lose in the first round of the playoffs. And midseason, we were 10-3. I said we're probably going to finish 10-7. And I highlighted at the start of the year, throughout the year, the first 13 weeks were very important, but the most important ones were this last stretch of football games against some of the best teams in football. And it looks like we're destined to get bounced in the first round. It feels like the same old Steelers. The biggest thing is something that you tweeted about during the game, Carson, is that Russell Wilson has regressed. I mean, in this game, you have the missed throw to Freiermuth. That was the worst one. I will cut Russ the slightest bit of slack when Muth drops a pass at the end of this game that could have set up a long Chris Boswell field goal that maybe he could have made and won. Boz is our freaking MVP, man. Build the Chris Boswell and Cam Hayward statues. But George Pickens has a lot of drops throughout this game. You think back to other games, he has the fumble inside the 5-yard line. He has the pick six on the flat route. Like, Russ has crumbled. And a lot of the old things that we always brought up about Russ, holding onto the ball too long, taking too many sacks, he got us. Weeks 7 through 12, Russ was 13 TDs to 5 turnovers with 255 passing yards per game, 65% completion, with a passer rating north of 100. Weeks 13 through 18, he's 4 touchdowns to 4 turnovers with 175 passing yards per game, 62% completion, and a passer rating of 81.3. I mean, I don't think there's any coincidence there that we play the best 4 games or 4 teams on our schedule, arguably the 4 best defenses. Not 4 best defense. The Bengals aren't. That's why this one stings a little bit worse.
Arguably the 4 worst defenses in football.
It's just disheartening. It's disappointing. And I even said that when Russ came on. I thought Russ gave the Steelers a higher ceiling when he's connecting on deep passes, but I thought Justin Fields gave us a higher floor. And the big thing with Justin, I got the freaking Fields jersey on right now, he can make up for this bad offensive line. And I think we've also seen another player on the Steelers offense regress, and his name is Dan Moore Jr. Against high-quality defensive ends, he has been a turnstile. He's just been getting beat all the time. And he had a good opening start to the year. You would hope that he had improved. He was horrible last year. He's back to being bad again, man. And so I think the Steelers are going to lose in the first round of the Ravens. I thought it was going to be the Texans. Unfortunately, we weren't even good enough to redraw the Texans. We have dropped back to Baltimore, and I'm not going to put it fully past the Steelers beating the Ravens because freaky shit always happens in AFC North Ravens-Steelers games. But the Ravens are on a roll. They have by far the 2 best offensive players in the football game. That matters so much. Our best offensive player played like garbage. George Pickens could not catch a cold in this football game. I put my neck out for George Pickens. I love him. He played a horrible game.
He did it.
The momentum says that the Ravens are going to beat us like a drum, and that's what it feels like it's going to happen. And the Steelers feel like they're going to be back in the same offseason. It's like Groundhog Day with the Pittsburgh Steelers, man. You just keep reliving the same thing over and over again. They build your hopes up during the first half. They crumble in the second half, get bounced in the first round, and then you're left in the playoffs going, well, who after the playoffs, who should their quarterback be? Who should their offensive coordinator be? I don't know. I'm exhausted, man. I want somebody young. I want somebody who knows ball, who can bring something new. Arthur Smith is stale. We need an overhaul, man. I'm not ready to quit on Tomlin because of what he does for this defense and our defensive floor, and I think that is the foundation of this football team and why they are competitive and good year in, year out, but the offense is still leaving a lot to be desired, and unfortunately, I think this was a trial run for us with Justin Fields. I think he's probably going to leave in free agency and go be the bridge quarterback for another team that gives him $10 to $20 million because we're probably not going to be willing to pony that up to him, and we're going to handcuff ourselves to Russ. And that's the other thing about this.
Dear God.
I would start Justin Fields in the playoff game because I think he gives us the best opportunity to win, and I think I don't know how to say it, a more aggressive coach. Mike Tomlin, what I'm saying, is very conservative, and he is willing to go down with the ship, and he is going to ride and die with Russell Wilson until we crash and burn inevitably against the Ravens. And I just wish that he would have the cojones to make that call and to make that decision and invigorate this team. This team needs a change right now. They need a lifeline, and I think that lifeline would be Justin Fields, a white light at the end of the road. And it's not good for cohesion or anything, but like I said, man, the vibes are horrible right now. I think you need to try something, and I think that something is Justin Fields. So I don't know, man. I mean, the overall story is the Steelers are going to get bounced, and we're going to be in the same
Yeah.
situation we always are. But that would be the adjustment that I make, Carson. I would make that call if I was the coach.
Well, he had the balls to do the inverse when he yanked Fields when he was playing well to put in Russ. Do I think that he is now going to go back on that? No. And I tend to agree with you. I would be tempted to go to Fields. My rationale basically being he can't be worse than Russ has been right now. And you give the Ravens a different look that they haven't seen. The Ravens are an awesome run defense, which is kind of the concern to me is Russ is I think the more effective passer. He's been really bad there as of late, but we've seen his highs. And so you might just find more success pushing the ball downfield against Baltimore than you are going to running the ball. And for that reason, you might want the guy who is the better pure passer. But Russ has just been horrible, dude. And I feel like what we saw earlier in the year was a complete mirage. I said this right away when we ranked our top 32 starting quarterbacks in football with Theo. My biggest regret immediately the next time that he set foot on the football field was having Russ at number 19. I was like, yeah, that's just too high. And he has just continued to plummet ever since then,
Fall like a
dude.
stone, man.
It's just been horrific. I mean, the last 4 weeks, all losses, the Steelers offense is putting up 14.3 points per game and averaging 4.4 yards per play. And the offensive
Oh my
personnel around him
gosh,
is
can you run that
uninspiring.
back? I'm sorry.
14.3 points per game, 4.4 yards per play. I know. I'm sorry, buddy. I'm sorry you had to go through all of
Wow.
this. It's kind of surreal how much they have just dropped back to every other Steelers team that we've seen in recent years, right? This was a better offense. The bar was never high there, but it was better than the abysmal offenses that we've seen in recent years. And now this offense is just abysmal. And Russ has been the biggest reason for that. His pocket presence sucks. His overall awareness for a guy who is as old as he is and has played as much football as he has is unbelievable to me. Like, I think about that final drive. He scrambles for a 3-yard gain,
Burn
stays
17
in
seconds off the
bounds,
clock, man.
burns 17 seconds off the clock. Then what happens the very next play? He takes another bad sack. So then you have to burn your last timeout and then literally has the game. I mean, George Pickens is wide open, and he just fully misses him. It was one of the worst drives that I've seen from a quarterback all year, and it was in such a big spot when they needed him to be the veteran quarterback, the best quarterback that they've had out of the last few years, where your competition is Kenny Pickett and Mitch Trubisky and Mason Rudolph and the boys, and he couldn't even do that. Hasn't been able to push the ball downfield as of late. But also the run game is super inconsistent. Like the Cinderella run for this team is over. The offense is absolutely horrible again. If you put up 193 yards against the Bengals defense, you're beyond saving, man. Like that is just unconscionable. So I would probably go to Fields as well. I just don't see really what the risk is when Russ looks like one of the worst starting quarterbacks in football and your offense looks like one of the worst in football.
Yeah, and like I said, the biggest issue with me for this team is just how defeated they look, how ready to quit and curl up in a ball. And my dad always says it. He says it anytime the team goes on these runs or falls apart. Mike looks like he's about to cry on the sideline. He does. Like
Yeah.
I don't get it, man. When Detroit's guys go down and push comes to shove, like that team has heart and fight, and I don't see that with Pittsburgh. I know that's cliche, but I don't see it with Pittsburgh right now. I don't see a hungry team, a team that is ready to go to battle, ready to fight. The defense has been without Dante Jackson. I thought Deshaun Elliott's return was really welcomed in this one, man. I thought the defense made timely plays when we needed to. It's been about the offense, and it's been about Russell Wilson, dude, and it is the same old story. And TJ Watt, for some reason, missed a lot of this game. I thought that was weird. He only played
Mm-hmm.
like, I want to say 60 to 70% of the snaps. That's just me guessing it off the top of my head from watching the game, but he didn't play a ton. But again, man, it's not the defense. I think if we needed to, I would bet on them being able to slow down Lamar and Derrick Henry a little bit, but it's going to be about Russ connecting on deep shots with George Pickens. It's going to be George being the best player on the field. And that's what I've tried to preach all year long, is that the Steelers are not a very talented offense. Like when you were looking at the NFL,
No.
right? They just don't have a lot of guys that are really dangerous with the ball in their hands. Calvin Austin's a nice gadget guy, but Pickens is the only real difference maker and top player at his position. And when he's not effective, when you can isolate him and remove him from the game, they're comically limited. The Steelers' offense is Russell Wilson deep shots to Mike Williams and George Pickens. And if you can eliminate those, they're a very limited offense that you don't have to worry about. They're not dynamic. And I'm just I'm not sad, Carson. I'm not angry. I am just disappointed of being right and watching the same old story with these Steelers, man.
It's really tough, dude. Russ is not 1 ounce better than he was in Denver. And there were still Russ truthers out there who were saying, actually, he was good. He was bad last year. There's a reason that a team that was trying to win football games benched him, and he's been really, really bad again. We do have a generous donation from Supernova in the chat, the world's biggest Bo Nix fan, who asks, when can we expect both of your playoff picks video later this week? Yes, we will talk about the Steelers game and all the others later in this week, and I don't think the prediction is going to be very pretty for that game for you, Logan. And we're going to do awards before that, so we'll have both of those done by midway through this week. Is there anything you want to say about the Bengals, Logan, ending this season on their 5-game win streak, but obviously still miss out on the playoffs? You're muted.
My fault. They're up there for one of the most talented playoff teams to miss that I've seen. It reminds me of those Drew Brees teams that missed the playoffs because the defenses were so bad. It's disappointing, and I know you're happy right now because you get to go play Bo Nix and.
But let me tell you the truth. Actually, I am incredibly excited to play Bo Nix, and I cannot wait to talk about that game. And I've already got Drew from Pick a Side texting me. I've never been more excited for a first-round playoff game in my life. But also, all this shit I was seeing about, like, oh, the Bills have to be happy that the Bengals are going to miss it, or before it was final, like, the Bills better have their fingers crossed the Bengals don't get in. At that point, I was like, all right, bro, just bring us the Bengals. We'll put up 40 on that defense. It's a horrible defense. Like, I have a lot of respect for Joe Burrow, and I think Ja'Marr Chase is clearly a top 2 receiver in football. Absolute monster. Got the Triple Crown this year. But also, like, I still had a lot of confidence that we were going to win that game if it came to that. And, like, the Bengals, you have incredible seasons from their star players. Burrow career season, Ja'Marr career season, Trey Hendrickson career season, T. Higgins monster season, right? But they also get no sympathy for me for missing the playoffs because they had such an easy schedule, dude. And they lost to the Patriots. And like, they basically lost every important game early in the season. And then, they racked up some wins against some not so good teams. And they had a good win against the Steelers. And they had a pretty good win against the Broncos. But outside of that, they didn't beat anybody who was not actively tanking all year. So tough luck, man. Tough luck. Didn't get in this year. We called it. We both predicted they'd miss the playoffs. The people said we were
I did think
not so crazy.
I did think they were going to somehow sneak in there at the end, but yeah.
Well, they did their part.
Start of the year, man. I mean, we said this defense was not good. I was Trey Hendrickson, though. Shout out, man. I mean, what a year for him. And
yeah,
for Burrow and for Ja'Marr Chase both, dude. Those are historic seasons. It's a shame they're wasted on a team that's not going to the postseason, man.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that at the end of the day, they deserve this spot more than the Steelers right now. They're certainly playing better football.
Oh, my gosh. Dude, nobody's afraid of Denver, and nobody's afraid of Pittsburgh.
No. It's sad. It's sad what's happened to the Steelers. Speaking of which, Logan, we're not going to get in-depth with a discussion of any upcoming matchups here because we are going to save that for our full-on playoff preview episode. But big picture, out of all these wild card teams, now that everything is set in final in terms of the playoff picture, who do you think is the scariest wild card team in each conference?
Well, I'll get the AFC over with because I kind of just alluded to it. I think the Steelers and Broncos are both super phony. So to me, it's clearly the Chargers. I mean, just with what they could look like potentially on their best day. Superstar play from Justin Herbert, which he can deal any given day. he can give you exactly what you need. If it's deep shots, if it's going underneath, right? If it's making plays with his legs, he is a special talent. And Herbert can play like a top 5 quarterback on any given day. I think he is a top 5 quarterback. If he throws his best punch, that's one hell of a punch. Obviously, the wide receiver room is limited, but Quentin Johnston had a career day today. Ladd McConkey is a monster. And the defense has had their games. Like, don't get me wrong. I concretely like Baltimore, I like Kansas City, and I like Buffalo more than Los Angeles. But I think the Chargers are my 4th team. I would have them above Houston. I would have them above Pittsburgh. I'd have them above Denver. So I definitely think in the AFC it's LA.
Yeah, I think it's pretty clearly the Chargers. The Steelers and Broncos, I think, do both have better defenses than the Chargers, but the Chargers' defense is good. And all of these offenses are limited in their own ways. But at least one of these teams has an elite quarterback, whereas the other 2 teams, I think, have major red flags who are probably going to get eaten alive.
Like, I know we didn't rank. I would probably move.
No, I think Russ is there. I think Russ is there. I mean, the last 4 weeks, man, it doesn't really get much worse than that. So I totally agree. It's the Chargers. Yeah. Okay. How about in the NFC? Who do you think is the most dangerous, scariest wild card team?
All right, I'm not going to bail on Minnesota because I know what Minnesota can do. It's definitely them for me. And Green Bay's feisty, dude. I like Tampa Bay. Or no, Tampa Bay's not a wild card.
Division winner, buddy. Oh, my God. You had to shoehorn in a Baker take here. You really like Tampa Bay that much?
Well, I think they're going to beat Washington, and then I don't know, man. I think the Bucs could push somebody in that divisional round, but it's definitely Minnesota. I don't want to sell all my Sam Darnold stock. I know we talked a lot about Minnesota earlier because of the game, but Darnold was on a tear. I mean, he made one hell of a push to this point. He was clutching big games. He dealt with pressure well. Like you said, I think they showed you the recipe. I think that's what you got to bring at Darnold. You got to get pressure home early and often. You got to make sure that you can cover these receivers one-on-one. That's the toughest aspect of this, and that's what impressed me the most about this win for Detroit was Terry and Arnold and Amik Robertson and the secondary, Brian Branch, Kirby Joseph, like the secondary and the pressure they got home. It's really impressive. They showed you the recipe, but I'm not ready to bail on them. This offense is still talented. The defense, I mean, some of these guys, like Ivan Pace Jr., Andrew Van Ginkel had a good game. Like Grenard, the defense is still really, really good. Cashman's back now. Like, I like Minnesota a lot. I think they're definitely the most dangerous wild card team.
They're my favorite too. I mean, it is an elite defense. They are very well coached. And I do think that Darnold on average is a totally solid starting quarterback. I just think he's capable of having a sort of nightmare performance. But do I think, for example, the Rams are going to be the ones to put him in that mode again where he's seeing demons? Probably not. They do have a good defensive line, but it's not a good defense overall. I could see the Rams winning that game because they have Matt Stafford and Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp and Kyron Williams and Sean McVay, and that means that they can basically win any game. And they beat the Vikings earlier this year. So, like, I wouldn't say that the Vikings are overwhelming favorites to win that game, but I do definitely view them as favorites. They are still my favorite out of all these teams. I like the Packers a lot, but I just think the Vikings defense is so much better than theirs. That's bigger than the offensive gap. You know, I've been a Minnesota guy. I'm definitely not selling all my stock, but I'm selling a little bit of my stock. Selling a decent amount of my stock just because of how high I felt like I was on them. Now I'd like to come back down to earth before the playoffs.
Don't forget, though, this team did just break the 99 Titans record for the most wins by a wild card team, though. 14 is the most ever for a wild card team. So
I'm going to pick them to beat the Rams.
I think so, too.
I wouldn't be shocked if they lost that game.
I like the Rams are a dangerous
They scare
team,
me,
man. I picked them to the NFC title game preseason, man.
You did.
I wouldn't be shocked.
No, the Rams are always scary, dude. All right, we're going to take a quick break then. On the other half, we'll answer a couple of big picture questions that we have heading into the offseason after some quick words from DraftKings. It's the most wonderful time of the year for getting in on all the hoops, football, and hockey action at DraftKings Sportsbook. In the season of giving, we're being gifted college football and basketball, pro football and basketball, and pro hockey too, almost 24/7.
So many games every day, so many opportunities to place your first bet. Try betting on something simple like picking a team to win. Go to the DraftKings Sportsbook app and place your bet. And here's a gift for all new customers. Bet $5 to get $150 in bonus bets if your bet wins.
Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code NERDS. That's code NERDS for new customers to get $150 in bonus bets if your bet wins when you bet just $5. Happy holidays from DraftKings. The crown is yours. Logan, one of the big stories of the day. Aaron Rodgers may have played his final game. We don't know. I would say he had a certain reflective, introspective air about him today. He told the sideline reporter, Pam Oliver, that he loved her in what was, I guess, a nice moment. You never know what old A-Rod's going to say. What do you think? Do you think that he's going to hang him up, or do you think he's going to be back next year?
Well, I think Rodgers is going to drag this out as much as he can because I think he likes the attention. So I think he's going to.
He said he wouldn't. He said he wouldn't before he told Pam that he loved her.
I think he's going to flirt with it as long as he can because I think he likes the attention. But I think he's probably going to retire. I think this season might have beat the football out of him, man. This is a disappointing season for sure. But I'd say at least he got to walk away in a good game. At least, you know.
Yeah.
Some quarterbacks leave in ass beatings. I always point to it. Dan Marino retired after losing 62-7 in a playoff game to Jacksonville. Yeah. And there were only two really legendary quarterbacks who got to retire off Super Bowls. That was just John Elway and Peyton Manning. You know, it's hard to go out on top. And that's what I want to emphasize.
Is my takeaway from that.
Mm-hmm.
And bring Nathaniel Hackett with you.
Bo Nix up next?
No, he's too far away.
I mean, maybe in 20 years when he's old and he's like experienced.
Well, he's going to be old in 2 years, Logan. He's 35 years old.
I forgot about that. He was 39 when he got drafted.
Correct.
Rodgers is one of the greatest quarterbacks, though, ever. 4-time MVP, 4-time first-team All-Pro, one-time Super Bowl champ. And on his career, he is number 1 in passer rating, number 5 in touchdowns, and number 8 in passing yards. And I've always said this about Rodgers. I think he has an underrated playoff resume. I think he's the second-best quarterback ever. I just give him that self-creation edge over Tom Brady. And what I mean by that is best, not greatest. I think when you're looking at legacy, Tom Brady's legacy is
right. So you have Mahomes 1.
Mahomes would be 1, and then Aaron Rodgers would be 2 for me. And I think the thing that everybody points to with Rodgers is his lack of playoff success. And I think it's a classic case of what people do with Josh Allen right now, where he doesn't win the games, but he plays as great as he can in them. The result just isn't a W for him. Football's a team sport, and this is for qualified quarterbacks. I set the minimum at 10 playoff games. Rodgers is number 4 in touchdowns per playoff game, 5th in playoff passer rating, and 7th in total yards per playoff game. And over his playoff career, Green Bay allowed 26 points per playoff game. That was the 4th worst playoff scoring defense in his time with the team. And the one time, I always emphasize this too, Brady had all those great defenses. The one time that Rodgers had the number 1 defense, he won the Super Bowl. And so that's what I just don't want this year to overshadow how great Aaron Rodgers was. I was goofing today, man. Discount double check. I remember when Rodgers was on top of the world. State Farm commercials. He had the World Heavyweight Championship belt, talking his shit. Rodgers is the man. And
he started doing crack.
Well, that's a different story for another day. The Aaron Rodgers I knew was the second best quarterback ever. And everything else aside, I got to tip my cap to that. He's a first ballot Hall of Famer. He's one of the greatest quarterbacks to ever play this game. And it's cool that he won. You know, I know he wanted to go to the playoffs, do a lot of stuff. I know some people thought they're going to win the division. They're going to be the number 1 seed in the AFC. You leave with a win. You got to beat Tyler Huntley.
Beat the Dolphins without Tua, man. Everybody beats the Dolphins without Tua. Tua MVP case. I'm going to make it. I think that he probably is done. I just can't see him coming back for the Jets with the disastrous state that they're in, with everything that we've heard about how much he hates Woody Johnson and his son Dick Johnson and his brother Erection Johnson, whatever the fuck those guys are named. It's all some version of cock. I just can't see him coming back. And so then I'm like, where is he going to go? Right. They're not going to be able to trade him. They're going to cut him so he can go somewhere that he wants. It just all seems a bit implausible. And he had that sort of twinkle in his eye today where before he told Pam that he loved her, he's like talking about it's always great when you get to play a game that you've loved ever since you were a little kid. And I'm like, this doesn't really feel like a guy who intends on playing more football. Now, to be fair, I do think Rodgers has publicly contemplated retirement like every offseason since 2021 when he was still winning MVPs. So you never know with this guy. He's certainly an eccentric fellow, but I think he's probably done. I could see him, though, pulling a Brady and saying, I'm coming back just to tell Ian Rappaport to go fuck himself. You don't get the scoop on me, pal. You don't tell me when I'm hanging him up. That's more of a Rodgers thing to do than anybody else in NFL history. And he's definitely got more football in him. Like, listen, it obviously wasn't a good year, but you compare it to how some of these other guys have gone out. Like, Rodgers is still a capable starting quarterback. So if he were in a better situation, like, yeah, I do think that
Mm-hmm.
he could be the quarterback of a serious football team, but how is he going to get there? Is he going to take that risk? Is he going to go through the whole ordeal of going to another spot, trying to find his way there? I'm kind of inclined to say no. And I think that he'll probably call it. But I agree with you. I don't think that his legacy should be tarnished. I don't think that we should hold this image of Rodgers in his final season as like the defining image of who he was as a football player. And I don't think that that will happen with time. I think he's done himself no favors with all of his strangeness. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that he definitely could have done a better job of taking accountability this year. And I think that he became the face of just an absolute shit show of everything that was going on with the Jets because he was supposed to be the savior and he couldn't be the savior. And then because of that, they continued to try to make these big changes to somehow salvage the situation, none of which work, all of which really just made them worse and worse off, especially the Saleh firing, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So I understand that. And he hasn't presented himself as an overly likable fellow, but my God, he is one of the most incredible football players to watch ever. I mean, truly, pre Josh Allen, my favorite quarterback to
Mm-hmm.
watch. And I agree. I think easily among the handful of best quarterbacks we've ever seen. I'm with you on the playoff stuff. That's not to say that he is without fault. I think that
Yeah,
he
yeah,
had some bad
of
performances
course.
in NFC title games specifically, and those are really big games. But when you do zoom out and you look at the big picture, who was generally responsible for their playoff exits? It was defenses that let him down. He individually was, for the most part, quite good. And I think one of the three most talented quarterbacks ever. I mean, in terms of pure talent, well, maybe we
Josh,
got to put Lamar up
Mahomes,
there too. I was going to say
Lamar,
Josh, Lamar, and
Rodgers.
Rodgers, but those guys are all in the top five.
Uh, Only thing I'd add, the
Marino maybe would be the fifth. I don't know.
the Jets should be operating in a post Aaron Rodgers world. You should not make any
Definitely.
decision motivated by the Jets' first mistake was letting Rodgers have really any say in franchise going. And I don't know if he had a say in the Salah. I don't. It's messy. It's dysfunctional. It's weird. That was probably their first mistake, like letting him. So much of the roster decisions, but you shouldn't like if you want a quarterback in the draft, if you want to go and get somebody in free agency, you should not let that stop you. You should be operating in a world where he is gone and retired and you don't have him anymore. So I think that's best for
Totally.
them. But I agree with you, dude. I could definitely see Rodgers wanting to scratch that itch come training camp,
Mm-hmm.
next preseason.
We'll see what the ayahuasca tells him, dude. But like I said, once you hit 40, man, I'm not holding anything on the field against you. It's like I've always said with LeBron, people still get on LeBron for first round playoff exits. It's like everything at this point is gravy, man. Everything at this point for LeBron is going beyond what anybody else has ever done. And for Rodgers, it's not that, but like just off this season, dude, he's sixth ever in passing yards by a player after turning 40, and he's fourth ever in passer rating by a dude in their 40s. Like it's really, really hard to play football at his age at a high level. And he played reasonably well this season. And even though it was obviously super disappointing, that's something of an accomplishment and it should not weigh down his career in totality. Logan, we talk about looking forward. We now know the order at the top of the NFL draft, and it is as follows for the top five picks. The Titans are picking one. Browns are picking two. Giants are picking three. The Patriots who were in pole position to have the number 1 pick before they beat the Buffalo Bills, playing Mitch Trubisky and the fellas, and then even pulling Mitch Trubisky at the end of the game, playing a bunch of second stringers. They played their way out of the number 1 pick. Then they fired Gerard Mayo right after that. So they're number 4. And then in the 5 spot, we have the Jags. How do you envision these teams approaching the top of the draft? Let's just start at number 1. Who do you think the Titans take?
I think the question is, does Tennessee buy into another year of the Will Levis experience? And
oh boy.
I mean, here's the one benefit I would give them. If you do that,
More Mayo commercials.
It's kind of a win-win in a way. If he sucks and he's really bad and you win like 3 to 4 games, maybe you get the number 1 pick again next year and you could take Arch Manning, which I really like that outcome. And you take Travis Hunter this year, and that would be awesome. The safest pick, I think, in this draft is to go with a D lineman or a defensive player like a Mason Graham and Abdul Carter, a high floor guy like that. It's maybe not the most flashy pick, but I think it's probably the safest. Or you take Cam Ward, and I think Cam Ward is my number 1 quarterback on my board. I'm going to be honest, I don't like any other quarterback nearly as much as I like Cam Ward in this class. Everybody else, I'm kind of iffy about. If it's a Shedeur Sanders, if it's a Quinn Ewers, whoever you might point to. I like Cam Ward a lot, and to me, that's the dilemma that Tennessee and Cleveland should both have. I think 1, 2, in whatever order it's going to be, it should be Travis Hunter, Cam Ward, or Cam Ward, Travis Hunter. And I think you take whoever you get in that second spot if you're Cleveland, but it's going to be what the Titans decide to do. And honestly, I think I'd take Cam Ward. I'm bought in enough on him. It's going to be the most valuable contract in the league maybe for the next 4 or 5 years if he pans out, right? You're paying him that rookie money. And the Titans, in my opinion, I never really thought they were like all completely dog water this year. I just thought
you were a big defender of theirs.
Bad. Yeah. Don't get me wrong. They're not a great football team, but I like some of the surrounding pieces, right? Tony Pollard. I like Tyjae Spears. I like Calvin Ridley. And then defensively, I like some of their guys up front, right? Arden Key, Jeffrey Simmons, some of this defense. What I'm saying is I don't think the Titans are super far away personnel-wise. Cam Ward would be a really cheap deal, and if he pans out, like I said on that rookie deal, you allocate the rest of that salary cap to building out the rest of your roster, and you're in the AFC South, which is also really beneficial to you, where the next 3 to 4 years, you could just leapfrog Jacksonville, who is, middling with Trevor Lawrence. Houston, who is sputtering with CJ. Like
middling was generous this year.
Yeah. I don't know, man. The Titans really have a chance to do something special, and I think, in my opinion, Ward and Hunter are the 2 most valuable and impactful players in the draft. So that's what I would do with 1, 2.
I see the vision of what you're saying with them waiting a year, sucking again, and then taking their guy at the quarterback position. Honestly, if I'm Tennessee, I would probably try to trade back with somebody. I'd probably try to trade back with the Raiders or some very quarterback-hungry franchise
next year or something.
I just think unless you really, really feel strongly about who you want, and probably if that's a quarterback who could be a franchise-changing player for you, if that's not the case, then I am just somebody who is pro trading back. There's a very, very strong track record that you're going to get superior value back. Teams will trade an excessive amount of draft capital just to move up a few spots. And for them, it's probably not going to work out because they're taking a gamble on one player. You have the opportunity to draft a number of players with those spots on better value contracts. And so if I'm Tennessee, I'm not thinking they desperately need a quarterback. I think there's a lot that they need. I've never been as high on the Titans as you. I think their line is bad, their offensive line. When I look at the top talents in this draft, I could see them taking an O-lineman a little bit later in the top 5. I could see them taking a corner because I think their corners are mediocre, the corner being Travis Hunter. They could definitely use a real good edge rusher, right? They were towards the bottom of the league in pressure rate if it's Abdul Carter. So I almost think that they're in a best player available spot. And that's why I think you could trade back a few picks and get more draft capital, and you wouldn't lose sleep over missing any one player. But if they are going to sit at 1, I would probably take Cam Ward. They do need a quarterback. He is by far my favorite quarterback in this class. I think he handles pressure so much better than Shedeur. I think he's a much better athlete than Shedeur. And I don't consider him like a high-end number one quarterback prospect, but I do think that he's got clear potential to be a franchise guy. Okay, so you're saying whoever the Titans don't take out of your top two guys, the
No,
Browns take.
your hypothetical's interesting because, yeah, that's what I would do. But also, if there's a team that wants to trade up and get Travis, or if they want to get Cam, or if they want to get Shador, I'm entertaining a trade down where I get a future first, or if I recoup a lot of assets. I like that too. I think that's smart because there's a lot of defensive guys I like in this draft, and there's some offensive linemen that I like in this draft. And so, normally how these things work, we saw it last year. It's an exception to the rule because of how many good quarterbacks there were. 6 guys go in the first 12 picks, right?
Mm-hmm.
We all know how the draft process works. Quarterbacks shoot up at the end of the draft
Yeah.
cycle. And so whenever somebody finally bites, if it's Shador, if it's I don't know, man. Carson Beck, like I said, man, I'm not a big fan of this QB class. Whoever it may be that's going to jump, if a team is willing to do that, I also think that's a really smart option. But if you're going to
Yeah.
stand pat, my first 2 guys are for sure Cam Ward and Travis Hunter.
Yeah, I think that I would take Travis if I were the Browns. I
Do you
think
do you
they're
play him
basically in
at?
best player available mode, right?
Do you think Travis plays corner or wideout, or do you
Yeah, I
think
think
it
he plays
depends on what
corner.
team he goes to?
I would expect him to play corner. I think that that's where he's more elite, but I do legitimately think that he'll play wideout in spots. Like, obviously, you can't expect anybody to play the percentage of downs on both sides of the ball that he did in college, but also, like, nobody else has been a full-time two-way player like that in college in a long time. Like, even Miles Jack wasn't that, right? He got like 400 yards as a running back or something. Adoree Jackson wasn't that. Jabril Peppers wasn't that. Like, I'm thinking about all of the two-way
Last full time
multifaceted
guy in
guys
the
we've seen.
NFL was Dick Butkus in like 1947, man.
Well, he's not going to be a full-time guy, but I do think he's a guy who you can use in spots offensively, but I think he's going to be a corner first. But I would just want the best talent if I'm the Browns. And yeah, if Cam were there, would I take him? Honestly, probably still not. I just think they're so fucked at quarterback as long as they're paying Deshaun. The Browns shouldn't even exist for the foreseeable future, in my humble opinion. What about the Giants, Logan? This is a team that definitely is going to want a quarterback. Would you take Shedeur if you're them, or would you say, no, thank you, and then hit the Shedeur on them? Shedeur. Bro is thinking about this one.
Man, I mean, I just feel bad for Giants fans because my honest take would be the Giants are so. Giants aren't actually like I like a lot of their defensive players: Dexter Lawrence, Brian Burns,
Up front, they
Kayvon
got
Thibodeau.
dogs.
It really sucks to tell your players and your fans to wait, but like the Giants to me are a prime team that should wait for Arch Manning.
Mm-hmm.
Dude, you know what? Take Ashton Jeanty or take Tetaroya McMillan and stack them alongside Malik Neighbors. Because if you really
What
like
about Will
Tyrone,
Campbell? What about a lineman?
I mean, you could take
Get
you
Evan
could,
Neal out of
or
there.
I was gonna say that's what I would do. I would get a complimentary asset. If it's a running back, if it's a wideout, if it's a tackle, I would get a complimentary asset for a quarterback, and I would get a quarterback next year.
I agree. I think that I would go with O-line. I just think it's more valuable than the other positions. And I really like Abdul Carter. It's kind of a bummer
Mm-hmm.
for me in my hypothetical little mock here to let him slip past 3, but I just think the Giants already have pretty darn good edges. How about the Patriots, Logan, at number 4? What do you like for them?
Man, I really wanted them to get Travis Hunter because I thought that would be really fun with Drake May and I don't know, or alongside
Yeah,
Christian Gonzalez. Like I thought
coulda,
that would
woulda,
be fun.
shoulda.
Tetaroya McMillan seems obvious to me though, or a lineman, but
Yeah,
this wideout room seems so devoid of anything. I like McMillan a lot. I think he's going to be a stud. So there's a lot of good options, but and their line stinks too. So I wouldn't blame them if they took a lineman, but I really like the idea of getting McMillan to New England and getting Drake May finally a weapon.
mhm. I totally agree. I mean, I think that you have to go offense. It has to be either O-line or receiver. in my world here, the best O-lineman prospect is off the board, so I would probably take Ted McMillan. I think that Drake can do a hell of a lot to elevate the group around him. So maybe you could justify, like, let's just take the best player available and eventually we'll get the dudes around Drake. But I think you owe it to him to put a more capable offense around him, because this dude very arguably had the worst offensive line and the worst receiving core in football this year. Like, he's in hell. He's making the most of it, but you got to help the guy out at some point. Okay. We'll round out the top 5 here, Logan. What do you like for the Jags? What can they do to help out T-Law?
I also want to correct myself. Earlier, I said Dick Butkus. I meant Chuck Bednarik, man. Concrete Charlie. He was the last two-way player for the NFL.
Dickie B didn't play any offense, did he?
No, he's just a middle linebacker. I was bugging,
just a
man.
cold stone killer.
Not like
Stone
O.J.
Cold.
Simpson, man, you know?
I don't even understand that reference. OJ was an actor. He was in the Naked Gun movies. He played Nordberg. That was his character's name. It's something like that. Nordberg, maybe. Phenomenal picture. Good guy.
Classic Nordberg.
Yeah.
Jacksonville. Well, you got Brian Thomas Jr.
Amen. Are you just thinking best player available for them?
Yeah, Abdul Carter, Will Johnson, Mason Graham, like whoever.
The thing with Abdul Carter, it's like, are you replacing Trayvon? Because you already got Josh Hines out. You're just rotating the
maybe
3 very highly drafted.
Put him inside, build up that defensive front.
I think Mason Graham.
Or get maybe get an O-lineman.
Mason Graham, your defensive front is monstrous.
Right. And I like Mason Graham a lot. That dude's like a bowling ball, man.
Mm-hmm. You can just bowl with him, can't you? That's what I look for in my football players. Any final thoughts, Logan? Regular season over with, done. Playoffs, here we come. Anything you want to say?
Nas Reed.
Nas Reed, man. Nas Reed. The Timberwolves.
Actually, last thing. Do you believe, Carson?
Of course I don't believe.
See what Bo Nix did to those Kansas City
I believe Bo Nix is about to get beaten 36,000-0. I'm going to save my actual prediction. Spoiler. It's going to be a convincing Bills victory.
Dude, Bo Nix was dealing today,
it was a nice game for Bo against Johnny Thunderstruck in the third-string defense.
He completed 18 straight passes. Get this, Carson. It's a rookie record. No rookie's ever done that before.
It's incredible. He's the GOAT. What can you say, man? I believe.
That's my takeaway.
I've got his face, his big, handsome mug tattooed right on my rear. I do think that I'm maybe going to investigate if Drew, buddy, the lucky ones who have seen it know. I'm going to see if Drew wants to put some sort of wager on this game.
Oh, no.
I'm extraordinarily confident that it's going to not just be a Bills win, but be a massacre.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it's going to be ugly.
We'll see. We're saving that for the playoff preview episode. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. If you did, there's so much more Nerd Sesh content. You can find all of our full shows on the NFL and NBA across our YouTube channel. Also on our YouTube channel, our video essays, video breakdowns. I posted a video today breaking down the Jokic-Wemby duels that we just got to see, the double feature from them that was so much fun. And we will have more content like that coming soon. And you can also listen to the show across all audio platforms. You can follow us across social, TikTok, Instagram at NerdSesh, Twitter at Nerd_Sesh to see clips from the show, to see graphics from the show, and to see all of our short form trivia content. And if you want, you can join our Discord. The link to that is at the link tree across our social media bios. And you can also check out our merch, which is also at our link tree and at breakingt.com. I do want to shout out Bryce Young and Michael Penis Jr. for playing a nice football game today. Michael Penix Jr. It was a fun game.
Michael Penis Jr. bald.
Well, why would you say something like that? It's Penix.
That's his name.
It's Penix.
That's what I said.
You disgust me. With that, as always, I've been Carson Brabber.
I have been Logan Camden.
And this was Nerd Sesh.